Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Kingdom Hearts 2 Critical Mode video walkthrough. We are returning to the Pride Land, and in this place we're going to be taking on the Hyenas in a boss fight, and then afterwards we'll be taking on the final boss of the Pride Lands, and it'll be the last time that we experience this charming little level. But in two videos back I talked about Taken 3, and I have to finish the tangent because I absolutely adored the first Taken. I thought the front cover was really cheesy, but I'm a fan of Liam Neeson. And I went into it with no expectations, and what I got was a rather dark but silly kind of revenge-y movie with some pretty awesome gunplay, some nice direction, some good action, and some, shall we say, unconventionally shocking moments, which I just didn't expect because I thought it'd just be cookie-cutter, dude runs around Paris and saves his daughter, when it was actually a little bit darker than that, a little bit more psychological, but not by much. You know, you're not going into an art film here, but it was still quality, and I liked it, and you could tell it didn't have the biggest budget, but it did what it did very well. And then they mentioned they were making a second one, which I was really excited for. However, there is a director by the name of Olivier Megaton, whose name is awesome, but whose directing chops are absolutely fucking worthless. Like, if I had one wish, and I could get infinite wishes, I would wish that this guy never makes another film ever, because he just doesn't know what he's doing in the places where it counts, and it's absolutely obnoxious. And I noticed this in Colombiana. And don't get me wrong, guys, I'm all for creativity. I think it's one of the driving forces for all innovations, and it's something that we definitely need. And I am always fortunate to witness people being creatively, you know, free-thinking as far as creating any kind of artwork and taking risks and pioneering. But all this guy does is film action scenes from 7 different angles, and then he tells his editor to cut them a second apart. And an action sequence that could have done with 3 different shots to have a fantastic effect of speed and haste and brutality, like something from a Bourne movie, or something from insert your favourite action movie, you know, Hard Boiled, John Woo, whatever you want to say. But instead, you get a million fucking actions, and it is absolutely ridiculous, and it gets to the point where it's happening so much, you can't even tell what's happening. You're too busy looking at why the hell is he cutting so much, and it ruined Colombiana for me. I turned it off, I hated it. It ruined Taken 2 for me, even though Taken 2 was kind of fucking stupid, using grenades to judge distance in a crowded city. What a great idea. But I thought the second one was appalling. I really didn't like it, and it was nowhere near as dark as the first one. The violence wasn't even as violent, and the first one wasn't necessarily, you know, some kind of Tarantino movie, but still. Like, it wasn't the Tokyo Gore Police or whatever that silly film is where it's just blood everywhere, but it was still integral to making it feel real, even though it was, you know, kind of silly. And then the third one comes along, and I almost didn't watch it because the second one left such a sour taste in my mouth. And then I looked who directed it, I saw him again, and in his defense, maybe it's not him that's doing this. Maybe he gives it to the editor, and he trusts the editor. He doesn't have too much input on it. He just watches the decisions, he gives them a thumbs up, and then he just goes and cuts a million pieces of shit into it. I don't know. But whoever is to blame deserves a strike, because they're taking the traditional rules of any cinema and they're making it worse. They're not improving it, they're not innovating anything, they're just making something which is the equivalent of a kaleidoscope for people who are pilled up and at raves. It's stupid. So he ruins the films, and the guy who directed the first Taken did a fantastic job. I thought he was perfect, but they get Megaton back anyway, they get bloody, you know, attention deficit super sugar kid back to do his thing, and it started off okay. It didn't seem too bad. And of course, this is the dude who'll use a million cuts in a dialogue scene. That's when nothing's even happening. You know, you could have an establishing shot and he'd still have 5 different fucking angles for something that's completely pointless. And then it gets to the first action scene, where Liam Neeson gets accused of murdering his missus. He kneels down, he disarms 2 people, kinda cool, it didn't look too bad, and then he jumps out a window, and that was it. That was the moment where I could have turned it off. 10 minutes in, I wanted it off. Because as he jumps out of this window, guys, you have to see this. If you can get your hands on it, just go back and watch it again. Or if you haven't watched it, just check it out, it's quite soon. From him starting to jump out the window to him landing outside the window, there's like 12 shots of the same goddamn falling out the window. It is the dumbest, most overly done nonsense ever. It's almost abstract in how much it's been butchered. And it doesn't achieve anything than a massive groan from me and this just willfulness to turn it off, because it irritated me to death. And from that point onwards, I was watching it like a parent watches a school play that their kid isn't in. You know, where you're just kind of like, yeah, it's just a bit shit and there's no charm here because, of course, my genius savant child is not in it. And that's how I felt for the full thing. And it kind of sucks too because they've introduced this angle of this cop, played by Forrest Whitaker, who I think is fantastic. He doesn't have the most to do in the film, but he adds a different edge to it, which could have been really well developed and a lot more interesting if it wasn't such a schlocky action film. But it was leaps and bounds better than the second one, but it was nothing on the first one, and unfortunately there's going to be more, and unfortunately if Olivier Megaton gets at the helm of them, they'll never be as good as the first. It's just how it works, and I don't know, I just wish Luc Besson would find one of his other stable of directors to touch this machine, because as much as they probably sell really well, it's hard to enjoy them. And that's coming from somebody who thinks that Paul Greengrass's stuff in, you know, the Bourne films is as good as it needs to be, and that is one of the most lauded techniques in cinema, because the shaky cam stuff, there's a very fine line between too much and people getting like motion sickness, and I think at times it can be a little bit too much, but it's always for the plot. He never does it on some dude eating cereal, and that's what Megaton doesn't understand. Every single scene has to be, you know, erection worthy, exploding with fireworks and glitter, and it's like, dude, stop, please stop, we don't need it. But who the hell am I? You know, I'm just some random dude who took a film course for 3 years and thinks he knows everything, apparently. But this is probably my least favourite fight in the game, because I think chasing these hyenas is a nightmare. Luckily enough, I managed to clean them up. It wasn't the best time. And of course, if you're ever curious of where to go, talk to your NPCs around you, they'll point you in the direction, and then you can proceed back through the Pride Lands to go and get Simba. And we're going to be fighting on this savannah, because we're going to be taking on probably the biggest boss in this game, excluding the final sequence, which is an interesting one. I've always found it to be a little bit underwhelming compared to the one in the first game, but I think it's one of those things where you either liked the first one better or you liked the second one, because they were both kind of indulgent, shall we say. Final Fantasy indulgency is the term I would give it. But I'm doing a little bit of combat here just to keep the video interesting. And of course I'm picking up synthesis items, which is really useful. But the Keyblade that I'm using is the Decisive Pumpkin. It is probably the best one for lower level characters, because every consecutive hit with this weapon increases the damage output, and of course it gives you a massive increase to your critical finishes. It means that this weapon, when used correctly, can be almost as good, if not better, than the Ultima weapon, and the Ultima weapon has better stats. So it's not to be trifled with. However, it does have a very interesting look, and I know there's a lot of people who are very cosmetic with their Keyblades. I found that out on my Birth by Sleep guide, where somebody was asking me why I was using a specific Keyblade. He said he couldn't because of how it looked, and I completely understood what he meant. It's just sometimes I can look past that for statistical reasons, unless I'm doing something, you know, fashion orientated. But be careful moving through the wastelands. You'll notice we're being attacked by Simba's indecision. It's somehow manifesting externally, and it's creating a Shadow Scar, who's pretty dangerous, but not as dangerous as this creature. I don't know if you saw what happened just then. Kind of highlights the thing I mentioned with the air recovery and why I don't like it, because it puts you back into danger because you don't get any real immunity, and all it does is, look at that! How cool is Goofy when he needs to be? That was beast. And we got a Frost Crystal, which is kind of awesome. But the Neo Shadows are quite dangerous on this game, but I think they're more dangerous in Birth by Sleep. I don't know why, but the traditional Heartless in Birth by Sleep seem to be a lot more dangerous than they were in Kingdom Hearts. That might only be on critical mode though. You know, I'm not the authority on Kingdom Hearts mechanics, because I don't know it as well as some people do. But I do know it's a very fun game, and if you're interested you should definitely check it out. Because I've been uploading this since November, and we're now, you know, it's 3 months, guys, and it's still bringing content to the channel, which just goes to show just how much there is in this game. Not too sure what this move is, but it's definitely interesting. You'll notice, I think I tried Reflect then, which might mean that I've realised the folly of my ways. I've evolved from the Cro-Magnon period into something much grander, something more intelligent, but you'll definitely be seeing it on Roxas. I realise that might be a little bit too late for a lot of people, I just wasn't aware. But I've been watching a few films recently, as I've mentioned, and I should really talk about them because it's always quite interesting when there's nothing happening on screen. But I should talk about American Horror Story because I feel this is a series that gets a lot less criticism than it deserves. All I ever see is people kissing this show's ass, and don't get me wrong guys, I loved the first season. I thought the first season was really interesting because it was dark, it was twisted, and it was different. And every single part of it kind of surprised me. The twist at the end that involved not the mother or the father was amazing. It just caught me off guard. I understood a lot of it, I got certain twists, but for the most that one just kind of blew me away, and it was a really clever conceit. I didn't much care for the ending. It was kind of contrived and predictable, but I was okay with it because I think the body of work was interesting. But the seasons that follow it, I'm going to have to strip them down because I just don't think it's as good a show as people seem to think it is. But thank you very much for watching, and you take care now.